All right, and can everyone see that okay? Thumbs up, yes? Okay, I see some head
Yes.
nods.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, so we are going to talk today about performance management and really what the process of performance management is, how to have effective conversations, and then progressive discipline, and what are the steps that we take to ensure that we accurately document areas, conversations that do require progressive discipline. So as we're going through, if you do have a question, I think it's easiest to raise your hand or pop it in the chat. Chelsea is in here kind of co-presenting with me. She'll be sharing some templates, etc., but also kind of monitoring the chat. There are some areas where I'm asking for some feedback, and so feel free to raise your hand and unmute or pop it in the chat. Either one works. We have about, looks like 60 people in today, so it's a little difficult to just unmute and shout it out because then we'll kind of have people talking on top of each other. Okay. But again, feel free, welcome to ask questions by either using the chat or raising your hand as we go through. We will also be recording this training so that we can use it for anyone who missed today, and then ongoing for managers if we don't have enough to do another kind of full training when people are promoted or move into the manager position. So that's all the kind of housekeeping items. So with that, we'll go through the agenda. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about what is performance management and what is employee discipline. So a little bit about the purpose and when we use these processes. Effective coaching, how to address issues early, really, and what is the difference between coaching and formal discipline, and when does it become something that we need to document? We'll also be reviewing the effective confrontation model, which really what this is how to have conversations, how to meet with people and address things that are important. And the word confrontation, I think, sometimes has some negative connotation related to it, but it really doesn't have to be. Really, it is about how do we confront a situation, and ideally, how do we do it early so that it doesn't end up becoming a disciplinary problem. Then we'll talk about the progressive discipline steps. What are all the steps that we have to follow as outlined in our union contract? The documentation and templates. So we'll share what the templates look like. We have done a revision on the templates, so they're going to look a little bit newer and fresher to everyone. But really the goal with the templates is to ensure consistency within the discipline process. And then lastly, we'll have some Q&A, and if time allows, we'll get to some practice scenarios. So that is what we are looking at today. All right. So to start off, really, before we get into the formal discipline steps, I just want to zoom out a little bit and talk about the bigger picture of performance management, because discipline itself, it doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? It's one piece, it's a tool within this much larger system of performance management. And you all, as managers, this is your day to day. You manage people, right? Performance management, when we talk about what it is, that kind of top paragraph there, performance management is the ongoing process of communication between you, the manager, and employees in support of accomplishing the goals of the organization or the goals of their position. So we want to make sure that we think about really performance management as a cycle. It doesn't just start when we have to write someone up, right? It doesn't just start when there's a triggered event that requires some sort of documentation. Instead, it's a continuous cycle of planning, right? Setting goals with your staff, setting expectations. So that's really the beginning of performance management. And goals and expectations are so important because we can't assume that people know what we want, right? We have to make sure that we set out what our expectations are for people in their position, what your expectations are as a manager to them. And then it goes in the reverse too, what their expectations are as someone who reports to you. And so, if anyone has been in a performance management or discipline conversation with me directly, I likely will have asked you, did this person know the expectation? right? Did we assume they knew the expectation, or did they actually know the expectation? So that happens in that planning phase before anything else. When you're working with your staff, doing your one-on-ones, planning and setting expectations. Then we go on to the second phase of performance management, which is coaching. And this is providing ongoing feedback and support. So this is in your team meetings and your one-on-ones and your huddles, but this isn't triggered by something specific. This is ongoing feedback, providing support to your people as their manager. Then step 3 is review, assessing and documenting their progress, right? So you set the expectations, you provide feedback, and then you assess it. How are they doing? Are they meeting the expectations? Are they following the guidelines, policies, procedures, whatever it is? That's really that review phase. And then the last piece of the performance management cycle is ACT, which is recognize, correct, or develop. ACT is actually where discipline comes in. So that is where we are potentially documenting performance issues. But really, if you're having regular, honest conversations with your employees, you're setting clear expectations, you're giving real feedback and supporting their development, the discipline process, the ACT piece of this becomes the exception, not the rule, right? We are doing it because we have to after we've gone through the rest of this, but it is not kind of our starting point. And so that's sort of, again, that bigger picture of performance management. So then moving on to employee discipline, right? So this is the ACT portion of performance management. So when you hear the word discipline, and you guys can put it in the chat or raise your hand, but when you hear discipline, what do you think of? What's the first kind of thing that comes to mind when you hear discipline? Nobody? Nobody has any thoughts on that? This is going to be a long training, you all. Okay, write-ups, my mom, negative. What else? Anyone else? Punitive. You're in trouble. Setting clear boundaries. In trouble. Correction. Punishment, right? So these are all kind of natural feelings when we hear the word discipline, right? That come up. And I think one of the most important things to talk about, and really a takeaway from today, is that discipline is not punishment. And really discipline, the purpose of discipline is to correct, right? The purpose of discipline is to bring something, right, to the attention of the person, and ultimately to support them in the correction of that. It is a structured process designed to correct behavior or performance, to communicate clear expectations of standards, to give employees a fair chance to improve, right? So a realistic time frame to improve, and to protect the organization and the team. And really, when we talk about protecting the organization and team, that is impact, right? So behavior or poor performance has an impact on your team directly. It has an impact on you lots of times, and it has an impact on the agency as a whole. And so really, when we think about performance management, we think about discipline, we want to think about it as a supportive process. The goal and intent should be to coach someone up, not to coach someone out, right? We want to provide the support. We want to make sure that they know the expectations, and ultimately we want to see improvement. So when do we use employee discipline? Well, there's lots of different potential reasons, but typically the items over on the right are some of the times that we would, right? Attendance, tardiness patterns, and it does say patterns. This isn't a one-time attendance issue. They've shown a pattern of attendance. They've shown a pattern of failure to meet performance standards. They've violated some sort of policy. Those would be reasons that we would look to the employee discipline process. Okay, so coaching, what do effective coaches do? So really, before we talk about the discipline part, going back to performance management overall, part of how we avoid employee discipline is through the coaching process. And it says up on the top of this slide, great managers don't just manage, they coach. And here's what that kind of looks like in practice. But before we go through each of these areas, just a question for the group. In your view, when you think about the word management and then you think about the word coaching, what do you think the difference is? What's the difference between managing people and coaching people, do you think? Support, learning and ongoing, coaching is positive, showing them how to do things, engaging. Someone says coaching is supporting, managing is supervising, managing is being removed, coaching is being involved, leading by example. Good. So those are all kind of good, good thoughts on what the difference is. When I sort of think about, to me, how to kind of define the difference, the way I like to think about it is that management is really about process and coaching is about people. Right. And so when you're managing, you are supervising, you're overseeing the process and how things are done. And then coaching, it is that support, it's that collaboration, it's the motivation side of things. So coaching, people side, and then management process side is kind of an easy way to think about it in sort of this example. So things that we can do every single day as effective coaches. And again, this is that bigger picture performance management, right? Because we don't want to move to the employee discipline piece unless we have to, right? We want to give people the supports within everyday coaching. And then we want to address things early and be really upfront about what our goals and expectations are. So the first area there in what effective coaches do every day is teach, right? So as coaches, right? So all of us as supervisors, as managers, we are coaches. And, part of that is sharing our knowledge, teaching people, helping people not only to understand what their job is, but also why their job matters and the impact of their job. Modeling the behavior that you expect, right? People look to all of us. They look to all of you to model that behavior, right? One of the best pieces of advice that I've ever gotten from someone is don't expect anyone to do something you wouldn't do yourself, right? And that has stuck with me for many, many years. And that is modeling, right? That's modeling the behavior that you expect. Explaining the reasoning behind standards. So who's ever been told, because I said so, right? Well, why can't I do that? Because I said so, because you can't, because that's the rule. That doesn't get a lot of buy-in, right? It's the policy, right? How many times have you had one of your staff tell a family that? Well, that's the policy, right? And then they're upset because they don't really understand. It's the same thing internally with staff, right? So explaining the reasoning behind the policy or the standard or the rule or the expectation, because that's going to get us better buy-in. And then creating learning opportunities on the job, right? So when we talk about coaching, it's finding those connection points to provide those teaching moments and opportunities to our team. So instead of just being like, oh, you did it wrong, instead, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the impact that this is having. Let's talk about the why behind it and really using it as a teaching opportunity. The next step here is communicate. So keeping the lines of communication open. So as good coaches, feedback does have to happen regularly, not just during a formal review or not just during a discipline process. So, and this is both positive and negative. Someone in the comments on an earlier question, one of the things that they gave was positive feedback, providing that positive support. And that's really, really important in communication, right? So when we're giving feedback, we don't want the only time that we're providing feedback to somebody when they're doing something wrong, when they're doing something negative. And so think about and not to share, but just for your own self, when's the last time that you gave specific positive feedback to an employee? And when I say specific, not just oh, good job, right? Because good job on what? Good job with what? It doesn't mean as much when you're not as specific, right? So when's the last time that you were like, hey, really great job on XYZ thing? right? People care about that, right? And you might think, people know they're doing a good job. Well, if you don't tell them, then they don't know that they're doing a good job necessarily, right? We can't assume that they know. And so providing that positive communication, but also feedback when things aren't going as well, right? And ensuring that that is addressed timely, that that's addressing early when it happens. And then checking for understanding, making sure when you provide feedback to people that they get it and that they understand. All right, next item there on what coaches do every day is setting high standards. And I alluded to this on the previous slide, but we want to make sure that our expectations are really, really clear, right? We don't want to assume that people know what we want. And so ambiguity is the enemy of performance, right? Kind of that gray area of, I'm not really sure. We want to clearly spell out what our expectations are of our staff and our employees. We want to define to them what good looks like, right? What does it mean when you are meeting standards? What does it mean for you to be doing a good job? Do they know what that looks like to you? And this could be when someone's new to the agency. It could also be when someone transfers in from a different team. Each one of us are different and our expectations might look a little bit different. And so we want to make sure that we're communicating those to our staff. And then being consistent across the team, right? So the same standard should be held across your entire team. And I think that we do this maybe subconsciously even, where we know that one person's good at this thing and another person's good at this thing. And so we sort of give them a little bit of leeway one way or another versus kind of having those consistent standards. And so we want to make sure that we are consistent across our team and not lowering the bar for the sake of comfort. So what this really means is, you have an expectation and then people don't meet that expectation. So instead of addressing it, you just lower your bar, right? Your expectation becomes lower because you don't want to sort of confront, the underperformance. And so what that is going to do is that's just going to lower what people give you. That's going to lower, what you're receiving. And so there's some quote from some book, I don't know, like a Dale Carnegie book or something, and he says in it, what you accept is what you expect. And so, if you lower your expectations to meet a person instead of raising your expectations for them to meet you, then that becomes the new norm. And so think about that in, your day-to-day and what you do expect from your staff. All right, next one there is creating a team. So coaches build an environment of trust and collaboration. We do this by uniting people with a shared purpose. And really, when we think about culture, there's certain levels of culture that are set as an organization, but much of the culture within your teams is set by you. You have the power to set that culture, meaning that, whether people trust coming to you, whether people feel like it's a collaborative environment, they can kind of ask you questions, ask the other teammates questions, people are helpful. That is set by you as the manager within the team. And, fostering safety within your relationships is one way to improve culture and create a team. Recognizing contributions, and then aligning your team around shared goals, right? And so you have to figure out for you what works within your team, right? So not all the same things work for every team. Your team size is dependent, your location, how frequently you're together, all of those things impact this, but it's how do you bring your people together to create a team? So I'll give you all an example of something that I do within my team. So within my team, during our team meetings, we have a section at the end of every single team meeting where we do shout outs. So everybody on the team shares a shout out about a colleague, right? Who's also on that meeting. I don't vet these. I'm not asking what people are going to share. This is just an opportunity for my team to recognize each other, right? And I participated in it as well, but it's a way to sort of shout that out and let other people know, like, wow, people are recognizing the work that I do, right? And it feels, I think for my team, it feels different coming not just directly from me, but coming from their peers. Again, this might not work for your team, but think about things that do. How do you create a team? We also start all of our team meetings with icebreakers. It isn't me creating them. Everybody brings one. It moves every single week, and they come up with and it's just a little thing to kind of get us started and learn a little bit more about each other. But again, those are ways that you can create teams. But the safety, making sure that people feel valued within your team is an important part of it. And then the last one here is motivate. So understand the motivation for your people, right? What drives each individual? And these things are different. Some people are driven by positive affirmations and feedback. Some people are driven by promotion, right? They're really ambitious in promotion and, more money, things like that. But figure out, some people are driven by the service that they provide to their families and their consumers. So figure out what drives your people and connecting that with the mission of the agency. I think what's such a cool thing about working here at VMRC is we have such a strong mission. What we're here to do is so, so important. And so how do we kind of connect that with our team and bring it back to really the basics of why we're all here and why we do this work, even though this work is hard. Celebrate wins, big wins, small wins, all the wins, right? We want to celebrate those. We want to encourage people through that. And you can do that by knowing your people as individuals, right? Knowing your staff, understanding those specific motivators. But, all of this is to say that this is your everyday coaching. This is things that happen as leaders and should be happening as leaders and managers and supervisors every single day in your interactions with your team. And so, part of that, the communication, setting high standards, teaching, those are coachable moments. Now, we use the kind of term coaching when we're also talking about documenting things that are happening, right? A documented coaching. And so, again, these things are your everyday things. Now, sometimes there are issues that come up, patterns that come up, triggered by specific events that are regular and reoccurring, and you realize with a member of your team that, ooh, this is something that we need to provide feedback on, set expectations on, and we really need to do this in a more formal way because this is a pattern that could become problematic that we want to nip in the bud early, right? And so kind of, I think the idea, the way that I think about this is this that I just went over, this is your everyday coaching, and you're kind of naturally course correcting as you go. But sometimes you have to go, ooh, I need to document this. And we need to make some agreements together on how we move forward. And so that's when, you're going to give your feedback, but when you realize, we want to make sure that this is documented, you're going to move into the coaching phase of documentation. And so that's what we're going to go over next. I'm going to skip that slide really quick. So there are two forms of documented coaching that we can do. So again, the idea behind these are informal conversations. They are not disciplinary in nature, but they are triggered by a specific observable issue. And we want to address them, and then we want to document that we've addressed them. And so the point of these, whether it's a coaching summary or a support plan, which we'll talk about the differences in a second, is to meet with the employee one-on-one, to clarify your expectations, and then to offer support and tools. We want to make sure in these documented coachings that we let the employee know, this is a coaching. I will be documenting it and sending an email to you afterwards with our agreements, right? To make sure that we're on the same page of what we talked about. This is the first step, you guys, before we move into the employee discipline process, right? So when you reach out to HR and you say, hey, we need to move through progressive discipline with an employee. Here's an issue that's happening. The first thing that they're going to ask you is, did we do a coaching? right? Did we coach the employee? Do they know that this is a problem? And the way that we do that is through either a coaching summary or a coaching support plan. So the difference between the two is the issue. So if this is an issue like tardiness, attendance, policy violation, that would be a coaching summary. So really we're going to clarify the expectations, offer the supports, follow up with the employee via email. If it's performance related, so most of you are in case management roles, and most of the time that we deal with employee discipline and case management is performance, right? They're not meeting standards. They're not getting their IPPs done. They're not getting their T19 notes done. They're not following up with families timely, those types of things. In that instance, instead of a coaching summary, you would use a coaching support plan. And the difference is in the coaching support plan, you actually complete the plan together with the employee and you make some agreements. The employee makes some agreements, some commitments on what they're going to do. For instance, I'm going to turn in 4 IPPs per week. I'm going to ensure that I do X number of T19s, right? And then you make some commitments as their manager. I'm going to, we're going to meet one-on-one. On a bi-weekly basis. We're going to do some shadowing. I'm going to shadow an IPP meeting with you, whatever it is. But the idea behind a coaching support plan is to create a path forward. Because if we wait to create an agreed upon kind of plan to fix whatever performance issue is happening until we're in the write-up process, it's too late. They're too far behind lots of times, right? We're already way past that. And so we want to get that, we want to address it and get started with it early. So what we've done is we've created some templates for you to use, either a coaching summary or a coaching support plan. It is either or, you don't have to do both. Okay, it is dependent upon the situation. So with that, I'm going to, Chelsea, can you share the coaching summary template as well as the coaching support plan template and explain the sections? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Maybe I don't have to. Oh, okay. Chelsea's got it. Perfect.
Yeah, there you go. I just took over. Sorry, Amanda.
Nope, you're good.
So this is the coaching summary plan. If you guys have had, already meetings with me previously for performance, and this will be or feel kind of similar. So we're gonna jump right into it. So for the coaching summary, we have, of course, the employee name and information on the top. Discussing their concerns and topics discussed during the meeting, expectations clarified, and then support offered by the managers. And then further down here, discussing the next step and agreed upon actions with the follow up date. We do not have to have employee signatures on the coaching summary. So it's a pretty simple template. And then for the coaching support plan, it's pretty similar as well. Again, with the employee information, reason for coaching right here, outlining all the concerns and issues identified. This is where the key differences are. Expectations are split here for the clear and measurable expectations and goals. And then right here as well, the collaborative support plan for employee commitments, and then also supervisor or manager support that's offered. And again, there is no employee signature that is needed on the bottom. And also for these plans, we're not going to be attaching them when providing after the recap for the meeting. We're not going to be attaching these documents. You'll simply just copy and paste this into the email that you send out to the employees. Okay.
Thank you, Chelsea. So any questions on the coaching templates or when we would use a coaching template? Okay, I don't see anyone's hands raised. Nothing in the comments. I'm
I
going
have
to take
I have
that
a
as an,
question,
yeah,
Amanda. Sorry, I thought about it a bit
yeah.
late, but um, so we want to set like measurable outcomes essentially on these coaching plans. But the nature of this job is so unpredictable. So what I've had a hard time with, or what I can see somebody having a hard time with, myself or anybody else, is, you say 4 IPPs a week, but then 2 or 3 cases on their caseload blow up that week, and then you find yourself kind of, wanting to make allowances for them coming short because, sometimes something can demand our immediate attention and it takes up a considerable amount of time.
Sure.
So some strategies on that. I don't know if you were going to get to something like that.
Yes.
But
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, things do happen. And so we want to be measurable so that we can track performance and assess performance. But we also have to be realistic with that expectation and really what the timeline looks like. And so there is a bit of, you know, we have to use discretion, right, in determining when something moves from a coaching to move into discipline. So I think that the best advice that I can give is to make sure that we set an appropriate timeline to show improvement, right? And that's really what we want to see through a coaching. That's the goal. The goal, whether it's a coaching or even moving into discipline, the goal is improvement. The goal is to, provide those supports to employees. And so I think, we want to be as specific as possible, but we also want to leave room for discretion for the things that you mentioned, and how we can do that is time, right? So we don't want to do a coaching. That's why we'll never say, oh yeah, let's do a coaching for a week, right? Because you're not going to see the improvement. We want to see improvement that's ongoing and sustained. So typically 30 days or maybe even 60 days to sort of see that happening and happening regularly. And that can account for some of those things that kind of pop up that are not as not as planned. And what Chelsea has done as well to kind of help out in this is not only do we have the kind of template shells that she shared, we also have some examples with different performance related, especially for the coaching support plan. Like, what are kind of the most common categories or topics or concerns, and how we can outline that in a coaching plan that we've seen to be the most effective. I think I saw some other hands, but now I don't see them. Let's see if anyone else, if you want to either pop your hand up or just go ahead and unmute, because I'm not seeing Sandra. Yeah.
I just had a question. I've been providing coaching for a while, and I could easily fill out a support plan. I've been doing it for months. Is it okay that the support plan is being filled out after the fact?
So the idea
Because I
behind
didn't have the form before.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
So if you've been having kind of informal coaching conversations with an employee for a period of time, and maybe you haven't seen that, because, you can absolutely start informal. It doesn't have to go into a documented coaching until you feel like, okay, I really need to make sure this is down on paper. The idea behind the coaching support plan is that it is done in a collaborative way, right? So maybe if you've already started without documenting it, then I would say that the next appropriate step would be the next time that you have a follow-up with that person, then to say, hey, what we're going to do now is we're going to document this. We're going to work together. We're going to make some commitments. We're going to document it together. I'm going to send it to you afterwards, right? So that way they realize, like, oh, okay, we're moving past maybe just the conversation. So is it okay for it to happen afterwards? Yes, kind of, but we still need to make sure it's a collaborative process with the employee.
Okay. I did create a plan together with her. I just did it made a form myself, and we created goals together and everything else. And that's been months ago.
Did you email it to her? Did you
Yes.
email it to?
Yes, I did. And it's
then
been a while back though.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying I'm ready to move to the next step, and I was waiting for this training today so I could learn how,
Got
like,
it.
what's next.
Yeah.
So
So if you've already done the coaching support plan, as long as it meets the items that we've kind of talked about, then the next step, if you're still not seeing that sustained improvement, as we'll get there, but the next step is to move to a verbal warning, and that becomes formal discipline. And so with that, that's when you have to reach out to HR, and we'll guide you through it. So Sandra, when you're ready for that point, then the reach out happens. We will ask, let's see what you've done to this point. Let's see that documented coaching. And then we'll confirm and affirm, like, yep, this makes sense. You have all of the required items, and we can move on to a verbal.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else on the coaching specific have any questions before we move to next slide? I don't know if I can see all the hands, but I think it moves to the front when someone puts their hand up. So, okay. All right. So, how to have these conversations. And this applies whether it's a coaching or whether it is formal discipline. But, effective confrontation is so important in kind of guiding us on how to address things. Because I think lots of times as managers, we sort of can feel like, ugh, it's such a hassle to like address stuff. It's not going to be fun. It's uncomfortable. I don't want to do it, right? It's not natural. This is coming from someone who has done this for many, many years. I don't love it. I don't go into conversations like, you know what? I am excited to, there's still a little bit of like, ah. And so what really, really helps me is planning. What really helps me is having a framework to be able to kind of follow when I go into these conversations. And so the framework that I want to share with you all is this effective confrontation model. It comes from a book called Coaching for Maximum Performance. I really, really love this. I may have shared it with some of you if we've had conversations about performance management in the past. But it goes through sort of 9 steps in how you are having, whether that's an informal coaching conversation or a formal discipline meeting. It works in both contexts and just sort of gives you the framework on what to do, how to have that conversation. So the first step is remembering that people are good. And this sounds a little bit silly, but it really is a mindset approach. We don't want to go into a coaching conversation or a discipline conversation with the intent of punishment, right? We want to go in with the intent of correction. And so if we are approaching a coaching conversation with a genuine belief that the employee wants to do well and can do well, then your attitude and your tone, that shift is going to be really, really important and powerful when you're having that conversation. So that question is kind of says, ask yourself, am I approaching this to help or to punish? And if you're in the mindset that you're approaching it to punish, you need to take a step back, right? Do not address things when you're mad or angry. Give yourself a little bit of time, but you want to approach it from that positive mindset. Tiambe, the name of the book is Coaching for Maximum Performance. This book, I will say, it's kind of a sales focused book. So some of the stuff doesn't apply, but there's a lot of really good nuggets that work. So remember, people are good. Number 2, tell them what behavior is inappropriate. So we want to be specific. We want to be direct. We want to be specific. State clearly what the expected behavior looks like and don't assume they know, right? So we want to be really clear. The expectation is that you are clocked in and ready to work by your scheduled start time in this example, right? It's very clear. It's very specific. Express a positive attribute. So acknowledge something genuine about their performance or character before addressing the concern. This isn't flattery, but it's balance and context. And this happens in lots of the things. And this is one of the reasons we don't like to address things, because maybe we have an employee who does a really good job with something, but then not a good job with something else. And we're like, we don't want to kind of, we don't want to be negative because we want to encourage the positive pieces of it. Well, that can come up in your coaching conversation. So, again, starting with directly what the behavior is. We're not sugarcoating it. The expectation is you're clocked in and ready to work on your scheduled start time. Then the positive attribute, you've built really strong relationships with families. That's exactly why it matters that you're reliable, right? Then telling them the impact of their behavior, connecting the behavior to the real consequences, whether that's for the team, consumers, the families, the mission, and really making it about impact. When shifts start short-staffed, it puts added pressure on your teammates and can affect service. That maybe isn't the best example for us, but when you are not available and clocked in ready to go, you have appointments. This impacts the families that you serve. This impacts the people that have taken time away to ensure that they meet with you. And then number 5, this is the most important step on this page, is ask the employee for the solution. So before you propose the solution for them, ask what their solution is to this problem. Employees who come up with their own solutions are much more likely to follow through. And you want to listen without interacting. This is the step, though, where most of us as managers, we jump in too fast. We want to solve it for them, right? This is what you need to do. This is how you can fix it. But instead, really pausing, sitting with it, being comfortable with the silence. Give the employee a minute to think. What do you think you can do to help meet this expectation consistently? and let it sit there and let them sort of ponder it and think about it versus, again, just you being the solution provider, right? All right, so that's kind of the initial sort of framework of the effective confrontation conversation. So then we move on to kind of what happens after. So you let them sit with it, you ask them for the solution, and then you agree upon a solution as the next step. So you collaborate together to finalize the plan. Both of you should leave the conversation knowing exactly what changes, by when, and what supports are available, right? So that you're both on the same page. So this example here, so we agree you'll be clocked in by 9 a.m. consistently, and I'll check in with you at the 2-week mark, right? So you've established what that follow-up is going to be as well. Recognize the improvement. No, I skipped a step, sorry. Monitor the employee's behavior. We went to the right instead of down. So follow through on your commitment and watch for that change. Don't just kind of, oh, we had the conversation, now it's done. But when you follow up, it shows that you mean what you said, that this is important to you. So maybe that's setting a calendar reminder, whatever it is that works for you, but you want to document both, improvements that you've seen as well as continued concerns. And that follow-up piece is really what makes the difference. It's really what separates conversation from change, right? We can go through step 1 through 5, we can have the conversation. If we don't follow through and follow up on it, you're likely not going to see real change because there's not accountability then. Number 8, recognize the improvement. So when you see progress, say so. Timely recognition reinforces the behavior that you're looking for, and it really rebuilds that relationship with the employee. You're giving them that positive confirmation, you're giving them that feedback, and it's a step that you don't want to skip. So I've noticed you've been on time every day this week. I really appreciate it. I want you to know it hasn't gone unnoticed, right? I see that you've turned in those IPPs, that you're regularly responding back to your families, right? This is excellent. I've seen it. I see it. I see that you're really putting in an effort, right? And that goes a long way in that behavior reinforcement. And then if the behavior doesn't change, reevaluate. So if the agreed upon plan, it's not working, then don't just ignore it. Return to the conversation, assess what's getting in the way, and determine if formal discipline is the next step, right? Because that's where it can lead if you aren't seeing that sustained improved performance. So this is where the coaching kind of piece ends and progressive discipline begins. But again, this model of confrontation can also be used and should also be used once formal discipline begins, because it follows the same steps. Remember that people are good. Give them specifics about the performance that's not working. Have them come up with a solution. Agree upon it. Follow up and kind of rinse and repeat, right? This works across the board for any of these types of conversations. Okay, so we've done some coaching informally, then we've done some documented coaching, and we're still here, right? We still are not meeting what we need. And so that is when we go into the formal process, the actual progressive discipline steps. So, we've given the employee, before we get here, we've given the employee every opportunity to understand the expectation and meet it. That should be where we are by the time we look at doing performance management from a progressive discipline process. And progressive discipline is not a trap, okay? It's a documented, fair process that protects both the employee and it protects you as the manager, and it protects the organization. And I know it could be frustrating, you guys. I know it can be slow, and you could be like, this is taking so much of my time. But again, it is important to make sure that we are fair and equitable. Also, we have an agreement as outlined in our CBA to follow progressive discipline. So this is a contract that we've agreed with our bargaining unit employees to follow. And so the only exception to progressive discipline, so that everyone is aware, well, there's really two exceptions. Number one is when someone is in orientation. If someone's in the orientation period, we do not have to follow progressive discipline through step 4. We do have to coach people. We have to make sure the expectation is clear. We should be documenting that, but we do not have to follow all the way through the progressive discipline steps if someone's in their first 9 months in the orientation period. That's one exception. The other exception is if there is genuine misconduct, so gross misconduct as outlined in the contract, we wouldn't follow progressive discipline. So this is something that's so serious or severe that we have realized we can't give it time for improvement. It's something that we need to terminate someone immediately without following progressive discipline. But those are the only two exceptions. You can't just kind of be frustrated and skip steps. We have to follow that process. And so progressive discipline is step 1, a verbal warning. This is formal discipline. It goes into an employee's personnel file, and it does require, all of these steps require HR approval. Step 2 would be a written warning. Step 3, final warning. This is new in our contract language this year. This used to be suspension. It is now converted to final warning. And then step 4 is termination. So that is the progressive discipline path that we have to follow. And you notice you have some timelines outlined on this. So step 1, 30 to 180 days. Same with step 2. Step 3 varies. We want to give some discretion because we want to give enough time to see improvement, like we talked about earlier with Matt's question, but also we don't want to give so much time that that we are not seeing things sustained and we're just kind of kicking the can down the line. And so there is discretion, and HR will help you out in kind of formulating and talking through what these timelines should be depending upon the situation. All right, so with this, I'm going to hand it back over to Chelsea to talk about the steps and show you the templates.
Yeah, so we'll go over the steps first, so the verbal, written warning, and final, and then we'll review the templates right after. So before I want to just jump right into the verbal warning, I wanted to just review the mindset of a manager and key things to look for when you are drafting up not just a verbal warning, but all disciplinary documentation, right? So as a manager, when you are drafting these for our review, it is good to keep in mind that all disciplinary documents may be reviewed or assessed by a third party individual, such as court individuals like lawyers or attorney, if by chance we were sued by the employee for wrongful termination. So it's very important that these documents remain professional and factual with measurable data and avoiding opinion-based statements from the manager itself. The tone of these documents should be addressing performance through the perspective of the employee's performance deficiency and not by the manager's opinion in that case, okay? Other key things to note to avoid when drafting these documents is, not including other individuals' name. That includes other employees' names, clients' name, UCI numbers, and things like that, especially in case management. Sometimes when we are having performance issues, there may be medical issues that happens in a parallel environment with it, as a manager. So we want to keep and address these issues separately, okay? And then with that, let's go over the key elements. And a lot of these are going to be similar with each other in nature. So just to start off, the key element to the verbal warning is addressing all areas of concerns. One thing that I would say to keep in mind as well is when you're doing the coaching summary plan or the coaching summary in general, you want to address all areas of concern, because if you should get to the disciplinary level of verbal warning, you cannot add additional areas of concern here. It can only be, you can only add the areas of concern that you have addressed previously in the coaching summary plans, okay? B, expectations and goals, clear, measurable expectations moving forward. So, the employees and you are on the same page. C, support and resources, any training that's needed, guidance, tools that may benefit the employee during this time. And if you guys have been in these meetings with me before, this is more of a collaborative feel too. Hey, as an employee, what can we do? What can we provide to support you to be successful in this role? D, timeline for improvement. We have built a timeline in place, 30 days to 180 days, just what is appropriate to measure the areas of concern, okay? Some key reminders is for all disciplinary levels, you need to consult HR before issuing. And usually you draft a verbal, send it to my review, and also HR needs to be included in all of these meetings. In addition, union representation. Oh my God, union representation needs to be offered as well. Meetings should be held in a private place. These meetings should not be held, let's say, in an employee's cubicle, right? That is not appropriate. These meetings can be held in a manager's office, in an HR office, a reserved conference room, over Teams, with a closed door. Anything like that would suffice. For verbal warning and up, an employee's signature is an acknowledgement only, and managers should document if an employee refuses to sign. And again, the verbal warning puts the employee on the first step of formal notice. Okay. Okay, so step 2. Written warning, and we used to refer this as the performance improvement plan, but now we are reflecting it as stated in the contract, which is plan of correction. So in this, these key elements and reminders, it's almost the same, but the key things to reminding is the previously addressed issues is now added onto the areas of concern. What dates did we provide a notice of coaching for and verbal and its outcomes to progress to the written warning? Adding clear, measurable expectations and improvement goals for the employees to measure out. Some key reminders is documenting all check-ins and resources provided by the management team. And these plans, you are able to extend if the improvement is in progress. So for example, let's just say you issue a written warning for 30 days because there was a lack of performance improvement during the verbal. So we want to measure out, hey, are you committed to this plan? Are you committed to the success of your role? So we want to measure out 30 days. And let's say, this employee does really well. They meet all their goals, but, they're just not caught up in their caseload yet. Then we can always extend it to, let's say, 60 or 90 days, whatever is appropriate to measuring realistically the completion of catching the employee up and being successful in their role. Okay, step 3, final written warning. So same key elements, just the key reminders for this step is that this final written warning should not be issued unless you are willing and ready to terminate an employee. This should only be the final opportunity for the employees to improve, and this step should not be extended indefinitely, okay? Any questions before we move on to the templates?
I have a quick question, Chelsea.
Yeah.
So is there a possibility, let's say I'm already working on a current verbal warning via PIP with a SC, and she starts leaking oil from another area of concern that's not being addressed on the current PIP. Now, can we do a coaching on these other concerns, or do we just hold tight to what we're working on and then do the coaching following the PIP, if that makes sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. Yes, do the coaching. If there's a part of management responsibility too, which is accountability, right? Once you start seeing that there is a performance deficiency, you should be tracking data, documenting, and addressing those issues immediately with the employee. So if, let's say, we do have a verbal for attendance, right? But all of a sudden the employees is now expressing, performance issue too. She's not meeting her T19 goals or whatnot. Then we should definitely start the coaching for that as well, and they will work together. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsea.
Of course. Okay, then with that, I will share the verbal. Okay. And again, these are really similar in nature to the PIP templates from before. On the top, employee information, areas of concern, expectations and goals, and then resources and support that's being provided by the management team, and then time frame for improvement. And then in this area right here, if the employee refuses to sign, all you would need to do is indicate reviewed with employee on said date of the meeting, and then employee refused to sign. So you would just put that there, you sign it, and then you send it to us for filing purposes, okay?
Chelsea,
Yes,
there's
Rebecca.
a comment. Can you make it
Oh,
bigger?
yes, of course, sorry.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Rebecca, you have a question?
I do. So, if this goes to like a verbal warning, so just as an example, say we have an employee who is not responding to communications, email, and telephone contacts, and the VMRC required 48 hours, 2-day period. Should we be documenting if it moves to a verbal? Should we be documenting that a coaching plan had been completed and the date of that on here to indicate that the required step was taken, or does that not need to be done? And if you were to scroll up in the first part.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be done on the verbal. We're going to ask you about it though. When you reach out and you say, hey, we want to move to a verbal, then we're going to say, great. Can we see any coaching? What sort of conversations have happened? So we are going to verify that. It doesn't actually have to go on to the plan until actually step 2, which is where we do previous. And that's to show the historical kind of history on why we're moving to the next one. But it's a good kind of catch that, yeah, there's not actually a spot on the verbal for it to go.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the next template we're going to review is the step 2 and 3, the written warning and final written warning. It's the same template. You would just have to check right here if it's step 2 written warning, and then right here if it's step 3 final written warning. Okay. And then, as Rebecca was stating, the prior disciplinary date, you would indicate that here, and down here we have added the previously addressed issues. So you would indicate the coaching date, generally what was the area of concern, what was agreed upon, what was the outcome, progressing to the next step. So you would provide all that data here in the previously addressed issues. Right here, the expectations and the improvement goals are divided separately to make clear indications of what is expected from the employee. And then down here, the resources and support that you have offered for the employee, and then time frame for improvement as well. Okay, and then right here, they have the indication in red: failure to demonstrate sustained improvement in areas outlined above this plan of correction may result in further disciplinary action up to and including termination of employment. Okay.
And just to give you guys a little bit of kind of, I don't know, background a little bit about this. So some of these specifics on what we're including are required per the union contract in the verbiage and language that it's outlined, which is why we aren't inputting previous until we get to step 2, because that, according to the contract, is what we've agreed upon with the union. And part of the work that we've done leading to here, and why it's taken a little bit of time to do this training with you all, is what we recognized and what happened. And maybe some of you have been a part of this process if you've had discipline going up to here, is when we met and when there was union representation in some of these meetings, they were kind of trying to distract with technicalities, right? Whether it's the form or it doesn't have this little thing on it and we want to. So we were like, okay, let's have a fresh start. So we worked together with the union with all of these templates, with all of the specific things, so that we can not be distracted by technicalities and instead focus on the performance issues and behaviors, right? Which is a really important part, to have the buy-in of our union representation, so that that way there's no foggy area, there's no gray area, and we do it the same every single time. We use the same templates, and I think that it's really going to improve sort of just what that process and flow is, because we've both agreed upon what the expectations are. So let me reshare here. All right, and sorry everyone, it starts back over at the beginning. So let me get to where I need to be here. Okay, so let's say we do all the things, right? And we move through all of the steps and we are at a final, and improvement still hasn't happened. Then that's when we move really to the final step, which there is no template for, and that is termination. And so the process for termination is, you as the supervisor, you're going to submit a termination recommendation form, and there's a document that we'll provide to you. You'll complete it, why you're recommending that we move to termination. And then that recommendation does have to kind of get routed through the chain for approval. So the HR analyst would review it. Then ultimately it goes to myself, it goes to the director of the department for final approvals. The ED signs off on all employment terminations. Then we would prepare termination documents. We'd schedule the termination meeting. We'd have you schedule that with the employee, and we, being a representative from HR, would be with you during that termination meeting. So it's not just like, okay, you're good to go ahead and terminate this person. You would need to, as a supervisor, review their timesheet, make sure everything is accurate, because we do have to cut a final check. If we are terminating, we do have to provide final check during the termination meeting. And the employee would be provided a written notice of discharge that we would go over during that meeting. I want to be really clear for any of you who have maybe participated in termination meetings in the past. When we are terminating, we are terminating. We are not there should not be any questions by the time we get to termination, right? I am not going to sit in a meeting and kind of talk about why we wouldn't terminate them, or here's why, or here's when we have made the decision. We have made the decision, and we are moving forward with separation on the day that we've decided, barring something crazy that might come up. I bring that up because I understand that maybe that hasn't always been the case, but it is the case. If we are making a decision to terminate, we are terminating. We would collect all of their, stuff. We would have someone on available, whether that's someone from another member of the management team or a member of the HR team, to pack things up. And really we would escort the person out. These are not going to be long meetings. They aren't very, it's pretty to the point. And we want to respect people because they're still people. But we also want to make it clear that, hey, these were our expectations. You were given the opportunity to improve and you didn't. So they're going to be brief. They're going to be private. They're going to be professional. There's not going to be any debate during these. If there is a gross misconduct sort of situation that doesn't move through progressive discipline and instead results in more immediate termination, then you as the manager, you may or may not be very involved in that. Typically, gross misconduct means there's some sort of investigation that happens that likely would be handled on our side, on HR side, and then we would handle kind of through termination with that person. And again, we would let you know as much as we could of what's happening, but likely you wouldn't have a ton that you would have to do in that meeting or kind of participate if it is a gross misconduct situation. Anyone have any questions about kind of the termination process and what that looks like? No, hearing nothing. Okay. So I'm going to go backwards really quick because I I skipped a slide to make sure that we were good on time, and I'm going to go back to it. So we've talked about kind of the process, right? The management process from a performance management perspective, from a discipline perspective, what that looks like. But really, when it comes down to it, it's all about accountability. And I think that when we talk about, in management, we might hear this word accountability. It's probably my favorite word when we're talking about management, but I think it's also a little bit misunderstood. So, the statement that's on the screen there, accountability is not a punishment, it's a gift. When you hold someone accountable, you're telling them, I believe you're capable, I take your work seriously, and I respect you enough to expect your best. So, think about an effective coach or manager or leader that you've had in your past, right? So somebody that you were like, I learned a ton from them, I really respect them. Were they super easy on you? Anyone? No one? Were they super easy on you? Were they let everything slide? No, I see some head nods, not always, no. I think that when we think about our own experience, we can go, yeah, probably not. Now that doesn't mean that they were mean, or that doesn't mean that just means that they held you accountable, right? When I think about people in my past, leaders that I really respect, they're all people that have held me accountable, that have given me sort of the room to do my job, but also given me the feedback as appropriate and held me accountable to the work. And so I think that this is such an important, it's such an important thing to think about when we're managing people. Accountability is, so there's a is column and an is not column. It's not micromanaging. It's not punishing people for honest mistakes, right? Because we all make them. We all make mistakes. Applying rules selectively or just to who you like. Waiting until annual review time to give feedback. Avoiding conflict to keep the peace. That is not accountability, but instead it's following up, right? On commitments, on deadlines. It's addressing problems directly, not ignoring them. Treating everyone consistently, right? So if we're going to be writing one person up, do we have other people on our team that are conducting themselves in the same way, that are showcasing that same behavior? How long have we let it go, right? Before we're getting to it. So making sure that we're consistent, recognizing when standards are met and when they're not, and then having the courage to have the hard conversations, right? Following that effective confrontation model and addressing things when they come up. And, I think when we're all a little bit introspective, we can all think about maybe it's right now, maybe it is, in the past, where we've realized maybe that we haven't been as consistent, or we haven't wanted to address things head on because it's hard or it's difficult, or we haven't felt that we were prepared or had the tools in order to do it. And we all have to own that. And the only way to move forward from it is to address it, right? And this happens sometimes. Maybe you let things go for too long, and now it's really bad. And you have to take some ownership of that, right? When you're addressing that with the employee and saying, you know what? We haven't talked about this directly. And now we're in a point where you're X amount behind, so what I want to do is I want to work together with you, provide you the supports, but also you have to recognize and understand the expectations. And this is how we get there, right? But some of it is owning our own mistakes in it from not addressing it. And that's the only way that you can get past that sort of that hump, to have and address these conversations, even if you know you should have addressed them before, right? Let's say that you have someone who, I don't know, what's kind of a silly, who's never in dress code, right? They wear sweatpants to work every day that they're in the office. You've never said anything to them. How do you say something to them now? Because you've accepted it, right? You've been okay with it. You've let it slide. And so the way that you do that is owning up to your part in it, right? So when you address it with them and you follow that effective confrontation model, you do have to own it as part of that. And you have to say, you know what? I know I haven't addressed this with you before and I should have. So let's talk about the specifics, right? And then go through and address that behavior. And so I say that because we talk about accountability to our teams, holding our teams accountable, but we also have accountability to them, right? And, I think when we have conversations like this, it's sort of like, oh, okay, yeah, I should have done that and I didn't. And that's not what this is for. But I just want to make sure that you all kind of understand that it happens to all of us. And so all we can do is move forward from it. So, what happens to a team when, as a manager avoids accountability, when we let things slide? What happens? And you guys can raise your hand or put it in the comment, but what's the impact to a team when a manager avoids accountability? They just let things slide. Sets a bad example, lack of trust, it will happen again, morale killer. The staff also let things slide, right? They do less, lowers the morale, lack of respect. Others think they could do it as well. Team doesn't take the manager seriously. Other people are affected, families are affected. That becomes the new expectation. Excellent. You guys got it. This is so important, right? We talk about all of these steps and all of the things, but I think when it boils down to it, accountability is really where it falls. We have to make sure that we're holding people accountable. We have to hold ourselves accountable, and we have to hold our team accountable. And if we don't, it lowers the bar. It does negatively impact employee morale. It doesn't create an environment where people feel valued. There's when it creates resentment from higher performers. Absolutely. This whole training, we've talked about addressing things, right? Providing feedback. But we spend a lot of time on our bad performers, on our poor performers, right? A lot of our time and energy as managers are spent on them. And it takes away from the time and effort and energy that we spend on our high performers. And our high performers see that. And so we want to make sure that we're sharing the feedback. We're doing the coaching with our low performers and our high performers. As managers, we're going to spend more time on the people who our time sucks for us, right? On the underperformers. But the better we can balance that, the more that we can make sure that we are consistently addressing things and hopefully addressing things early before we have to go down the path of performance management, the better off that we're going to be. All right. So let me go to, I think, our final. So we have a couple of practice scenarios here. So first scenario, an employee has been 10 to 20 minutes late 5 times in the past month, and they've never been coached about it. So where do we start and how do we open up the conversation with them? So if anyone wants to raise their hand and unmute, I would really appreciate it. So an employee has been 10 to 20 minutes late 5 times in the past month. What do we do? Janelle, you're first up. Lucky you, and thank you.
So I had this happen recently, and we talked about if their schedule works with their actual lifestyle. She had an 8 a.m. start, so we adjusted the schedule to make an 8:30 start in hopes of that. And then also talked about the reason I'm reaching out to this is because you consistently are not showing up on time and coming in late or not messaging me to let me know you need an adjusted schedule. So we changed her remote work schedule to try to accommodate what seems like her lifestyle is.
Very good. All right. So really, you started with an informal coaching, right? No documentation at that point in time. And you told them the behavior that was appropriate, right? And asking for a solution, right? So asking for the solution is what then can figure out, okay, the schedules maybe don't align. Where are we? But again, letting the employee come to you with the solution versus addressing it like, hey, you need to set an alarm, right? Again, we're not people's parents. We don't want to force a solution on them, but instead having them come up with their own solution. Awesome. Anyone else have any kind of example that they want to share? Nope. All right, there's another one. So don't worry, you'll have a chance because everyone is so ready to share. So the next option, the underperforming employee. So a long tenured employee has been making frequent errors. You've had a coaching conversation 4 weeks ago with no improvement. Where do you go now? What's your next step? Somebody raise their hand for me. I will wait. I am patient. Olivia, you're up.
I think Jenna rose her hand
Oh,
first.
okay.
I'm playing. I can do it. I don't know if my answer is correct, but I'm just thinking because I've actually had this come up of having a conversation with them about that non-improvement and offering and seeing where they need more support. So do they need a refresher in the policies? Do they need to observe a meeting? Do they need something like that? So I would have that conversation about refreshers, whether it's internal processes or how do we help families with certain referrals. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else have whoever raised their hand first that I didn't get and I got Olivia.
That was me. That's when I would meet and do the more formal, like the written coaching plan, where they come up with, where we meet and we talk about, and I've done this one before and it turned out wonderful, where I had them tell me, realistically, what do you think you can get done? How many IPPs can you get a week? Where are you making the errors, and coming up with that formal, but like informal, the written coaching plan. That one is where I would.
So the documented coaching.
Yes, documented coaching. Thank you.
And I think that you're both right, because it is situation dependent, right? That's why this is not like, we can't just give you a thing and says handle each situation this exact way, because it does depend, right? So you have a long tenured employee, they've been making frequent errors. Is it the same kind of error? Do we think that it's really a lack of knowledge or a lack of understanding? Well, in that case, maybe it is additional supports needed, additional training, additional policy review. Could be. But if you've had that conversation already, you've had a coaching conversation with them, you provided some supports, it was informal, you didn't document it, and we're still here, then yeah, Jenna, in your kind of case, move to a documented coaching. That is likely the next appropriate step, because now this could likely lead to discipline. Because I think there was a question in the chat from someone earlier that said, do we always have to document it when we're doing a coaching? No, you should be doing coaching every single day with your employees, right? Providing feedback. But if you think that this could lead to discipline, then you want to make sure that you document it, because documentation is the first step that we have to, documented coaching is the first step before we can move into progressive discipline. And so documented coaching would likely be where you would go with this particular situation if you haven't seen that improvement and you've already given the supports. Awesome. All right, and then the last one here, an employee is reported to have made a threatening comment to a coworker in front of others. So, do the progressive discipline steps apply? What are your immediate steps? Who are you calling? Someone raise their hand for me. Let's see who's first. I don't know who's first. Tanya, you're first, I think.
Thank you. That would be gross conduct and wouldn't need to go through the progression of the steps, and would not first reach out to HR before addressing immediately.
Very good. Yeah. So this is a situation that it depends, right? We don't know exactly what happened, but it would be something that we'd need to investigate, right? If a threatening comment was made, there were observers of that comment, right? So I guess the very first thing is if we feel unsafe, then we need to take appropriate action, right? That way. But if it's, hey, someone made this comment, we know that's not okay, it was really, then yeah, reach out to HR. What we'll do really quickly is we'll investigate it and we'll determine, is this gross misconduct? Does that meet those guidelines? Is it progressive discipline? it depends, right? It depends on the severity, what was said, that sort of thing. But this would be a situation that immediately, yeah, you would reach out to us and we would walk through what that looks like from an investigative standpoint before we kind of take any other formal action. Again, if we feel unsafe, then that's separate, different. Then we want to, you know, depending upon what it is, we might need to contact the authorities. It depends. But yeah, this would be an HR situation. We would investigate it, and likely, if it was gross misconduct, we would move forward with termination. And, you know, we don't take these things lightly, but we also want to ensure that we're addressing things appropriately when they come up, and, you know, making sure that, you know, everybody feels safe in our environment, which is why, you know, the gross misconduct carve out exists, right? Because we want people to be safe. We want people to feel comfortable. All right. So with that, there are some, someone asked the question, will we be sharing the slide deck? Absolutely, we'll be sharing the slide deck. We'll be putting it in backstage under, I think it's management resources, but we'll send out the link to it. And there are some, I think, really good resources available, not just in the slide deck, but also just kind of for review. So there's a kind of quick reference sheet that we've created, which is kind of a practical, what are the steps that I need to do before any discipline conversation. You want to talk to HR, review their history, gather the facts, right? What to do during the conversation, following that, that effective confrontation model, and then what do we do after the conversation? We've also included the effective confrontation model, all the steps on one sort of sheet so that you can kind of use it when you're having conversations and get comfortable using it. I mentioned this, but planning is so important, right? I try to never go into a conversation blind. I plan it out. If any of you have worked with me, maybe I've given you a script before, or I've given you some, I do that intentionally because it helps in the planning process, right? The more comfortable and prepared that you are going into a conversation, the better outcome you're going to have. And so I like to think through the effective confrontation model before I start the conversation. I like to put some bullet points out for myself. I would highly recommend that you all do that, that you plan a little bit. 10, well, probably not 5 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes of planning before a conversation and a performance management conversation with an employee can make all the difference, because you're going to feel more comfortable. You're going to feel better going into it than if you hadn't planned. And sometimes we will even do, we'll do pre-meets. Chelsea might do a pre-meeting with you. Sometimes I might be in that pre-meeting, and we'll kind of talk about we'll talk about the process. We'll talk about what this is going to look like, to really just help you feel. And if you feel like you need that, then ask for it. If you feel like you want that kind of extra help within preparation, we are here to support you. And then the last kind of little resource here is just really the performance management documentation steps, just as an easy kind of quick guide, right? So we start with a coaching summary or coaching support plan, either one, and then we move on to the progressive discipline, formal discipline steps. So again, these will be available out there. Hopefully you all find them useful. But kind of to wrap up, and then we'll open it up for general questions, is some key takeaways from today. So, you know, discipline ultimately is about correction and support, right? It is not about punishment. And we want to make sure that we all have that mindset of improvement first. That's where we should be going. Address issues early. A coaching conversation now saves a termination later, which sounds a little dramatic, but I think it's so true. The earlier we address it, the earlier we get in front of it and set our expectations and hold people accountable, the more likely we are to not have to result in a disciplinary situation. Use the effective confrontation model. Describe the behavior, express the concern, ask for the solutions, right? Those are all really, really important. We want to make sure that we are being consistent and we are treating people as people and giving people respect, even in the conversations that we have with them addressing their performance. Follow the progressive discipline steps and consult HR before any formal action, right? So your informal coachings and your documented coachings, you don't need to talk to us. If you want to talk to us, we're happy to provide you support. But before you do any sort of formal Documentation, you do have to reach out to us and we'll kind of help walk you through and provide guidance and consultation. And then last one, document everything specifically, factually, and promptly, right? Especially when we're in the actual, performance disciplinary process. We want to make sure that we have really good and thorough documentation that we can back up what we say, which is why the documented coachings are really, really important. Because if we're like, well, we know we've talked to you about it. We have had situations, and some of you on this call have been in these situations where an employee says, no, you haven't. No, you haven't talked to me about that. Right? And you're like, what? We talk about this all the time. What are you talking about that we haven't talked about it? That's why we have to document things, right? It helps to align. It helps to make sure that everybody's on the same path and there's no sort of like assumption that people know. But we've agreed upon things. We've made it clear. We put it in writing. No one should ever be surprised going into formal discipline. Right? If you sit down in a formal discipline meeting and someone's like, what is this? I had no idea. That is problematic, right? That means we haven't done our job right. And so being clear on our communication and documenting things is really, really important. So I know that's a lot of information, you guys. And some of it is repetitive to things that you already know. But I am happy to kind of take any questions. If you all have any questions generally, anything that you'd like to ask, and we can kind of talk through. So thank you, Matt. Matt's kicking us off.
I know that I'm not I know this question will apply more widely than just for myself, but if we're having an informal coaching or whatever the case may be, and we're getting these, I'll call them explanations, but we know that it's kind of fabrication, or it may be something not verifiable, but you're like, really, that's what the excuse is. I'm wondering how to approach that without, accusing somebody of lying about whatever their explanation is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's obvious. Like it's a consistent, oh, I tried to call back and they never responded, or their phone was off, or I couldn't leave a voicemail. Like you see consistent uses of an explanation, that it's a pattern that somehow is applying heavily to this one person, but it's not an issue that other service coordinators are having, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, so I think calling it out in a way that's professional, but also transparent, right? I recognize, or I see that you consistently give that reason, right? It doesn't, that doesn't line up with the complaints that I'm hearing, right? And why is that? Where's the disconnect? Right? And so that's how you kind of put it back on them. It's not perfect, right? But it is a way to kind of address it and call out, like, look, you don't have the blinders pulled over my eyes without saying you're lying. If it's, I think lots of times I've definitely heard like people having IT type stuff, right? Oh, well, it didn't work because, my dial pad wasn't okay. Well, what are we doing with that, right? I've heard this from you multiple times. Have you opened a ticket, right? What is that? Copy me on that ticket. Let's work through that together. Let's make sure that but it doesn't seem like this is a consistent issue across the agency. So what's happening with you specifically, right? Because when you call them to account, then it's like, are they either going to do something with that and stop using that excuse, or are they going to continue? And if they continue, there might be a point where we have to say, we're not buying into it, right? That wouldn't be where you first start.
Right.
But I think call it out without saying you're lying, but call it out a little more kind of professionally, maybe. Does
That's
that help?
my specialty. It did.
Yeah. All right, Olivia.
And I'm sorry if you touched on this, but in situations where we've had someone who has been on multiple either coaching plans or has even gotten maybe to step 1 or 2 and then kind of released from the plan, is there a time frame between, I guess, a plan and another plan where either we have to do that coaching plan again, or are we able to start at step 1 and then also kind of with that same example, like, I guess, can someone have as many coaching, not coaching plans, but actual step one plans, the entire time they're here, I guess?
Yeah. So there's no kind of limit on the number that they can have, but there is some discretion that we have to use in when do we kind of restart a plan. We want to see sustainable improvement, right? That's what we want to see. So if you're seeing if they've gone through a step one and it progressed to a step two and then they got it together, right? And they were good to go. Well, we might want to, when we do that step two, we might not want to just say 30 days. We might want to extend that so that we can see the sustained improvement ongoing. And it is situation specific. We have, maybe in some examples, maybe the plan was for 60 days and they improved and they kept it up. And then the next month they just went back into the toilet. Well, what we did is we said, you know what, this is the same exact issue. You haven't shown sustained improvement. We are going to continue. We're going to extend your step two. Right? Now, if it was 6 months later or a year later, we would probably restart it. But we want to make sure that we've agreed with the union that we're going to use timeframes in our discretion that make the most sense to show sustained improvement so that we don't have to kind of restart the whole beast all the time. Sometimes you'll have to, though, right? If they, again, performance is an ebb and flow. It's a wave. You're going to have people who do really good for a while and then they drop off for whatever reason. And then, back up. If people just got to performing and then they stayed at performing, your guys' lives would be a lot easier, but there wouldn't be as much management to do, right? That's just not how people work. But yeah, we don't want to restart it if it is the exact same issues. We want to make sure that the timing, the timing allows for continued and sustained improvement. And all of that said, we can progress earlier than the timing if it's appropriate, and we have done this. So let's say that we set a step two plan and we said 90 days, right? We want to see sustained improvement for 90 days, and the next month nothing. They didn't do anything, right? They didn't show any sort of improvement. Well, guess what? They're going to move on to step three at that point in time because they're not following their part of the plan. And we can absolutely progress earlier if it's appropriate, if they have not shown effort or any sort of improvement in where they are.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. What else? Anybody else have any questions? Okay. The training was so good. No one has any questions. We're all experts. Okay. Well, if you do have questions, you know where to find us. Please reach out. Chelsea, in her role as HR analyst, she is I'll kind of just take a couple minutes to explain. Her role has shifted a little bit in that her focus is employer relations, right? Her focus is employer and union relations. Her time and primary effort and energy is spent in this area supporting all of you in your needs regarding regarding employee relations. And so feel free to reach out to Chelsea, to reach out to myself. We're happy to kind of work through situations and provide that guidance and consultation. But when it comes down to it, hold people accountable, make sure that we are, that we are consistent with our teams. And if you need something, ask and we're happy to help. So before we end, I know Erin had something. So if you don't have anything else from performance management, then
No.
I'm gonna.
Yeah, I didn't have it. I just didn't want anybody to leave yet. I had one more thing to just go over. So I was just going to say, like, don't clock off yet. Hold on.
I was going to add also, Erin, Donna reached out to me and IT has a quick update before you can do yours on Flowscape, if that's okay. So Morel?
Yes.
Did you want to talk about Flowscape?
Yes,